Okay, so this webinar is now broadcasting, and so given the time, people will still just be starting to log on now. People will be frantically making that last cup of coffee to sit down and enjoy the tremendous witty repartee of Manuel, Muelle and myself. But you'll notice that we're sort of prevaricating at a moment, for a moment or two, because it takes just a fraction for the recording to kick in. But it should be in by about now. So at this point, I'd like to welcome all and sundry. I know that there will be a great many Haven Home Safe staff who will be glued to the screens, of course, as they're working from home. This will be the highlight of their week. No, not at all, really. But it will be hopefully entertaining and shed some light for our Haven Home Safe people and many others who have started to join in and observe these webinars about how community housing organisations who deal with society's most vulnerable people, how we're dealing with the COVID-19 experience. And I think we could say now we are in a COVID normal world. And this morning, my time, I'm joined by yesterday afternoon time in Boston.
It's actually 8 o'clock in the evening.
Is it 8 o'clock in the evening? Oh my God, it's still bright out there, Manuel.
I know. It's like we're heading into summer while you're heading into winter.
It's Boston where the sun always shines. No, that's not renowned for that at all.
I don't know about that.
So good evening, Manuel, and good evening to anyone else who's in the States. I suspect there'll be a couple. Certainly we know some people from the UK are dialing in. This is going live on Facebook, not only on the network for Haven Home Safe. And so my name's Ken Marchingo. I'm the CEO of Haven Home Safe, based here in Victoria. We're a housing and a homelessness outfit, and Victoria and Australia's first registered housing association. And I'm joined this morning, my time, and last evening's time in Boston, Massachusetts, by Manuel Muelle, who is a great friend of mine, who I have a notorious inability to pronounce his surname. And
you do a lot better than most.
Well, thank you, Manuel. And I don't know if you noticed, Manuel, but we have over my shoulder the Boston Red Sox cap and another one over my other shoulder, just so it's clear. This is Red Sox territory, even here in Australia. Manuel's often made the point that the B could stand for Bendigo and probably should. I've also thought Bordeaux and Barolo, but there are other references to more esoteric pursuits. Manuel is and I'm going to introduce Manuel and the organisation that he is so instrumentally a part of, and then we'll have a bit of a chat. But Manuel is the Vice President of Membership and International Exchange for the Housing Partnership Network. The Housing Partnership Network is a 100-member organisation that is run from Boston, but it's a national organisation in the United States of America of what are termed high capacity, not-for-profit housing developers, owners, and financial institutions. The financial institutions bit, the CDFIs, fascinating stuff, particularly for Australians. We don't have any remotely similar kind of infrastructure in the way that we deliver our housing portfolios. And perhaps we may sometime in the future. So the shared mission of Housing Partnership Network is to help literally millions of people, millions of American citizens to gain access to affordable homes and the thriving communities that they endeavour to build. They built a network and a group of innovative, very, very innovative social enterprises, which is very much how these not-for-profits in the United States are seen. And they leverage their collective talent, ideas, capacity and innovation through the Housing Partnership Network, which is a remarkable outfit. Some would say that Power Housing Australia bears a passing resemblance to Housing Partnership Network. I might add a passing resemblance, perhaps on the top line without the detail, but it has been noticed that the bright idea that I had about forming a national industry peak was in fact that idea of mine was stolen by Housing Partnership Network some 24 years before I had it. Tragic stuff. Anyway, moving on. So Manuel is responsible for Housing Partnership Network's membership meetings, its member services, its expanding peer exchange efforts, as well as the International Housing Partnership, which they resource amazingly well. The International Housing Partnership is a partnership between the leading not-for-profit housing providers in 4 jurisdictions primarily. Australia, obviously, the United States, obviously, Canada, the United Kingdom, and we have recent times, I believe, let into the fold a lone soul Kiwi, Greg Orchard. Hey, Greg, you'll be watching sometime, sometime soon, I'm sure. But the HPN is based in, I think it's from memory, is it Washington Street, number 1 Washington Street in Boston, right in the heart of Boston, near some of the truly staggeringly, awfully ugly, brutalist architecture that has defined
Boston City Hall. Right.
City Hall, yeah. So Manuel has also managed the organisation's planning and administrative services, which started off as the National Association of Housing Partnerships, and he's worked in real estate marketing, business development. He's worked internationally in Lisbon. He graduated from a university in Spain. He has completed undergraduate studies at St. Louis University, done professional coursework in property management, real estate development, finance. It just goes on. But the other thing that no one talks about, and this is why we've brought Manuel out into the light today, is that Manuel is renowned for putting people together. He's renowned for suggesting and planting an idea that someone else runs off with. And as they say, you can achieve anything if you don't care who takes the credit. So if, for all of you people who've watched CSI, think of Manuel as someone, you rarely see him moving, but if you were to shine that blue light, you'd see his fingerprints over initiatives and innovations everywhere. So Manuel, welcome. Welcome to Life Under Lockdown.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you. Very nice.
So Manuel, can you tell us a little bit about some of the things that Housing Partnership Network have been working on just prior to, I guess, getting locked down in this COVID-19 world we're in?
Yeah, well, I mean, just prior, I mean, it's like we were in March, and for us, you know, March is the last month of winter. So that first quarter of the year for us is typically a little bit slow. We're doing some planning. You know, we were, you know, planning our upcoming meetings. We're working on business development, you know, as we typically do. You know, and then, you know, we start hearing in the background this stuff about COVID, or it wasn't even COVID. There was a coronavirus, you know, thing, and there was like, you know, one case here, one case there, and you know, next thing you know, it's you know, March 10th, and we decide that we're going to need to, you know, like have everybody start working from home, you know, starting like the next day or in 2 days. It really sort of built up really quickly. The state of Massachusetts declared a state of emergency. I guess it was around March 10th, and you know, they asked like larger businesses to, you know, to sort of start working from home wherever possible. And although we're not a large business as such, we sort of saw that it was in the cards, that it was going to happen for us. And why would we wait? You know, there are others in this country that waited, and you know, that didn't work out that well. So we sort of like at the first sort of instance in which, you know, we were told like, you know, it's really best if you start working from home. We did. We sort of like packed up our stuff and, you know, and went home, took our laptops, you know, hooked them up, and we you know, our concern was that, you know, this is going to be, you know, strange. Although, you know, we are a national group, but we have some people that do work from home, and you know, it is. We knew that it was possible to do a little bit, you know, but for everybody to be working from home seemed like, you know, a real stretch. But you know, like all things that you sort of like reject the notion of, it turned out to be actually fairly easy.
So it's interesting. We were just before this went live, we were just chatting a little bit about the now non-existent division between home life and work life. And I was saying to Manuel that, an average day for me would be a bit of time in the office, a couple of meetings, walking from one meeting room to another meeting room, maybe a meeting in my office, down to the car park, into my car, out to an off-site meeting somewhere, often driving down to one of our major offices in, I refer to it as South Bendigo for my international colleagues. The rest of us would refer to it as the capital city of Melbourne. You'd be overnight somewhere, attending a few extra meetings, pressing the flesh and shaking hands and endeavouring to do deals, and back into the office and in and out. And so they're quite defined periods of work time, non-work time, that bit between work and home time, and then home, whatever it is you do in this time we have at home. That's all gone. And so what I've found, Manuel, and I'd be interested in your experience in this too, because it is like I'm switching on about 8 o'clock in the morning and I'm just glued to my computer. My glasses don't come off my face for 9 to 10 hours a day. I'm finishing up thinking I'm exhausted by the time I'm hitting 5 or 6 o'clock. And I've just nailed so much stuff. But what I'm actually doing is I'm generating more stuff for people around me, just as they are generating more stuff for me. And so actually our workloads bizarrely seem to have gone off the scale. I mean, that's my experience. What are you finding with this?
I think that's exactly right. I mean, that's our experience. And what's curious is that some people say, and I've heard this from folks in other organizations, like some New York groups especially, that they feel that they're like working harder than ever, longer hours than ever, but getting less accomplished. Whereas I actually feel we're getting a lot accomplished, and we are working in many instances longer hours, or for some staff that that have like sort of some family constraints. If they're living in a small apartment, they have children, the spouse also is working from home. There's got to be accommodations around time, so they may not be working like 10 hours a day like some people, but they're working at odd hours, but the work is all getting done. I mean, and it's not as if initially you sort of have this feeling like, are you going to be able to trust that it's going to get done? And yet, it becomes very clear that it is working. That people there are some things that are like glitchy, but it is surprising how Zoom, which you can overdose on Zoom, and we have like maybe way too many Zoom meetings, but it actually works surprisingly well. I mean, the technology has been developed very, very, very well, and regardless of the security issues that they say about like Zoom bombers and things like that, I haven't found any like glitches that have made it seem like oh, this isn't working at all. But the glitches are people's internet connections. Their Wi-Fi is sometimes spotty, and people break up, or can't really be seen, or they get kicked off. But for the most part,
Yeah. So I'm just laughing about the Wi-Fi glitches and so forth, because as you know, half an hour before this Zoom meeting was to happen, my web camera just fritzed. It just fritzed out, and so. So I'm thinking I'll just hastily do something from my iPad with a glorious backdrop of my backyard and my favorite thing in the world, my barbecue on the back deck. But no, my IT team came literally running to the rescue. So my IT guy has managed to get another of his IT guys to find the last remaining webcam and microphone on the face of the planet and whip around to my house. Uninstall the old one, install the new one in record time. It's like literally about 8 minutes before we're going to go live, we sit down and it's all working. The technology is amazing, but also so is I tell that story because the capacity of people to lift during this time, I have found truly astonishing. People just getting things done. When I was talking to Geraldine Howley, who's a great friend of yours as well as mine, I was saying the window dressing has fallen away from much of what we do. It'd be nice to have the slightly polished edges have had less attention than the practitioner basic work. which I find, to be fair, I find a little bit liberating, because at the heart of all community housing organisations, we are practitioners more than anything else. Now, we might be practitioners in development, we might be practitioners in client service, we might be practitioners in homelessness, but we're practitioners nonetheless. And it's a lovely kind of base to get back to. But as far as practitioners go, you support 100 high-performing groups of practitioners. What are some of the changes or some of the things that have happened and changed with your world in how you support practitioners? Because you guys have a political space that you operate in, and you're very adroit at it. But most of us as practitioners, of course, do not. So the depth and breadth of housing partnership network services, how's that kind of changed over this time?
Yeah, surprisingly, it's actually sort of been deepened. Our connection with our members is sort of like never reached as deep into the organizations as it has during these past 3 months now, I guess. We started, like, right off the bat, we started doing these Zoom meetings around different communities of practice that we have. We would get our CFOs together, we would get our COOs together. We've done 3 rounds of 12 sessions each, since the middle of March. And they're all, like, incredibly well attended. Folks are connecting with one another. They're eager to hear what is happening in the different jurisdictions. They're eager to learn from one another. They're eager to do, like, what you call R&D. It's like, give me an idea I can steal, and I will take it and apply it. And it's been actually working tremendously well. And on the policy side, we have been collaborating, much more than usual with some of the other, what you call peak bodies or intermediaries, whatever we want to call them. Some of the other large ones in the U.S. We've been working collaboratively with them, and sometimes it's hard. There are some that we have much more affinity with than others, but it's been good. We've been getting sort of our concerted messages out, and working to try to, like, there's so much money that is being put out there, in the U.S. to try to address sort of the economic crisis that this pandemic has created, that we want to make sure that some of this money, like, goes to housing, goes to, to actually providing a roof over people's heads, stuff. So, we have some proposals out there for like $40 billion of this, $28 billion of that. And it's, it's been work. It's been a lot of work. And our policy VP and Lisa Alberghini, who's our EVP for policy and, membership and communications, spent a lot of time, like, in that coalition building and working on sort of defining the ask. But it's been a really good collaborative experience, both with our members and with our other organizations that we work with.
I've got to unmute myself, that's right. So it is a fascinating thing how many of the Western democracies are essentially pursuing the same responses to a lesser or greater degree. So, we too, here in Victoria, have been, and certainly Hope Safe, working through our peak groups, our intermediaries, to lobby government. And we've had some success there with a recent announcement in Victoria for $500 million worth of money to be spent on upgrading social housing, particularly public housing, but some of it for social housing, a little bit for crisis and transitional housing, which is, this is all very welcome. But the scale between the United States of America and Australia, or any state in the United States and Australia, is truly staggering, can only really be appreciated by people who've been and spent time in both jurisdictions. But I recall after the 2008, 2009 great crash, the Great Recession in America, and the train trip from Boston to Washington, D.C., and seeing the derelict and empty buildings and factories that just characterised that Amtrak trip at the time. And, we all fear similar things happening again. But at the time, I recall, Manuel, in Washington in 2011, there was a meeting with HUD, the Housing and Urban Development Department, that for Australians to put in perspective, the HUD department budget is probably similar to our gross domestic product as a nation. No, it's pretty solid. And HUD had inherited a huge amount of residential stock as a result of the financial meltdown because of the essentially two guarantee organisations that held the paper on a lot of low-income loans, where people just walked away from their homes, sent the keys back in the mail. For the Australians who don't know the term jingle mail, when we undertake to purchase a property and we have a mortgage, the mortgage is against us as humans, secured by the property. In the United States, the property is secured by the mortgage. The human can walk away from it. In simple terms to describe the difference. And so you could just send your keys back to the bank and say, thanks very much, can't afford this, I'm walking away. And so many of those properties made their way back, ultimately following the paper trail back to HUD, who then had this amazing problem to have. What do we do with all these properties? And so we had this fun meeting, Manuel. Do you want to let me know where that ended up?
Yeah, well, it was a really good meeting at the time, because I think what we were trying to do with HUD is it coincided with our International Housing Partnership meeting, and so we were taking advantage of the fact that in other countries, scattered site, what we refer to as scattered site property management, was the norm. It's like, and Ken at the meeting, actually said, somebody was describing scattered site property management, blah, blah, blah. And then Ken said, we call it property management because, that's what you do. In the US, it's not. In the US, management tends to be at the site level, focused at the site level. There's a site office, and it's, much more densely populated multifamily buildings. It's different than the stock in the UK, except for some places. And certainly different than the stock in most parts of Australia. So we were taking advantage of the fact that we had these like leading lights from all these organizations that sort of practice this great art of scattered site property management, and we said, well, let's have these guys explain it to them, and it was a good meeting. The officials were very receptive. It was very senior officials in the FHA, the Federal Home Administration, which is the entity that was actually then saddled with the properties. So I think we left feeling good. And then, over the course of the next year, we worked with them off and on to try to develop some program for getting the properties out and getting our members to be able to sort of acquire them. But ultimately, the terms that they created were so onerous and just not user friendly for nonprofits that it just wasn't going to work. And that's part of the, we'd have to get into the deeper conversation about how the U.S. system favors the for-profit sector in affordable housing anyway, which is 80% of the affordable housing in the U.S. is owned by for-profits.
It's an entirely different mindset of how government subsidizes and encourages and incentivizes enterprise for the public good, but platformed by private profit. I mean, I think there's examples there with healthcare as an example. We know what the OECD average for healthcare is. I think I've spoken about this on another Life Under Lockdown thing, but the United States basically spends 3 times as much as the OECD average, 3 times as much as all of the other IHP members countries do, but arguably gets a very different result, you'd have to say, sadly. So, but Manuel, in terms of, and so thank you for the trip back in time to the HUD office and that conversation with the FHA. The experience, again, in dealing with government is so similar. We have many times, and even recent times, been dealing with a nameless state government who may be close to our office, or one of our offices, who put property out there into the marketplace for affordable housing purposes, but then so constrain the deal with red tape that, in fact, it becomes impossible to deliver. So we expect to see some of this red tape, some of this largely, can I say, largely pointless regulation disappear, because, you know, the bizarre thing is when the state funds a not-for-profit to deliver a public good and then has a regulatory mechanism in the background to make sure the public good is always there for the public, you'd wonder why you tie it up in just quite that much detail. But, you know, there you go. So in terms of some of your members and this notion of dealing with people and kind of trying to support people in this distributed network that you have, because you've got people all over the United States. I think you've got, was Chuck up in Denver or somewhere like that?
Yep, Denver,
yeah. And Lisa, where does Lisa work from?
No, Lisa's in Boston.
So she's in Boston. Okay. Hi, Lisa. Hi, Chuck. And hey, Tom as well. I could probably go through a whole list of names, but I won't, because we'd spend the rest of the day saying hello to each other. So what are some of the changes that you're picking up in terms of some of the things that your members are doing? Have you seen any particular innovations that people are pursuing in the way they're delivering services or managing buildings? And obviously our heart goes out to Greg from New York when he was telling us yesterday about how in one of his buildings, all of his staff have come down with COVID there. I mean, Tom Bledsoe, the mercurial and legendary CEO of Housing Partnership Network himself came down with COVID. I mean, these things must reverberate through the workplace. I mean, how does that feel for people, and what sort of changes are you making to the way you work?
Yeah, well, just on that point, that the guy was based in New York, but he was talking about a property in Chicago where all of the staff basically came down with COVID. So I think there's been pockets of sort of horror stories like that, in which it's been really difficult. I think people have managed through, you know, very well. I mean, New York had a very dark month, which they had, like, you know, some of our groups in New York had, you know, several residents, you know, die, and the maintenance staff were frightened and scared to go into buildings, and, you know, people just, you know, they gave them some additional hourly pay, you know, for the danger work, but it's like, does that compensate you if you're afraid for your life? So there was a lot of existential stuff, you know, happening. I think it's as things have settled down, and sort of the volume of that is not there, but the complete fear hasn't gone away. I think people are still concerned, but now they're like, you know, we humans are so good at adapting. You know, ultimately, at first we freak out, and then you start, like, you know, breaking it down, and, you know, kind of solve the problem. So I think, like, people are finding new ways of working that they hadn't thought of before, or they had thought it's too complicated to do that. You know, that would never work. I wouldn't even want to try it. And now they're saying, it works. So, you know, what other things could we be doing that we don't think would work, just because we have these prejudices against them working? You know, and part of it was like, can you really, you know, have all your staff, you know, working from home and make it work? Can you really just reach out to your residents through technology, or in the cases where the technology doesn't really work for the residents, just by calling them? You know, as our friends in Canada were saying, it's like, you know, that was like, the best thing for the residents was to call them. In the US, they're probably more suspicious of calls. So, you know, there might be, you know, if they can get on, they can get texts or whatever. Like in California, I know, like, one of our members in Berkeley saying that the residents love getting texts from staff. That really works for them, and that makes them feel like, you know, connected, that staff cares. There's been, people have found, like, all sorts of different ways to, like, you know, try to help residents with food needs, and there's been a huge problem with that. There's you know, the U.S. has a very thin support system, you know, in that regard, and food has been a huge issue, just delivering food to people, and, you know, getting food, especially to the elderly. You know, the staff everywhere have been finding new ways of working. And, you know, one thing that really struck me, I was having this conversation the other day with, I don't know if you remember, Susan Friedland, who runs this organization out of Berkeley, California, called Satellite Affordable Housing. And then Bart Mitchell, who runs the Community Builders, which works in multiple states, and they own about 18,000 units. And we're both talking about how in a way, like Zoom at the staff level has become a great equalizer, because everybody has the same size square.
Yeah,
And,
true.
and in a way, it's sort of, except for like, like the staff that don't have, laptops, or computer equipment, but for the most part, it's basically the hierarchical thing is gone when you're in a Zoom meeting, in a way. And people are able to sort of like, sort of shine and come up with ideas. And then Susan was talking about how, like, she's seen leadership emerging from sources that she never imagined, would. And people have, like, really good ideas that can be implemented. They're very practical, and they find a solution, to things. So I think that's been one learning experience.
Yeah, I mean, from a sort of traditional management hierarchical point of view, the heresy that people might have ideas about how to make their workplace work better, huh? Yeah, I think this is fabulous. So as much as I think that the back-to-back Zoom meetings, whether they're Zoom meetings, Blue Jeans meetings, Microsoft Teams meeting, Google Meets, pick your platform du jour that you want to use, but the back-to-back meetings is incredibly wearing. So we're all suffering from a version of Zoomitis, and then when you get this cognitive overload, because in a face-to-face meeting, you're looking at someone, you're communicating, but then someone else is talking and you might be sort of gazing off a bit into the distance or thinking about a point or writing something down. But when you're in a Zoom meeting, you feel compelled to be glued to the screen. And so, there is this kind of cognitive overload that's happening, and you're conscious that, oh my God, I better not scratch my nose. Someone might think I'm, doing something wrong, or, I've got to keep my hands in plain sight, like people say to me.
Or standing up to adjust things, and
So
you got to do this. You got to do this, Ken. You got to go like that. See?
Oh yes, okay.
That's what you're doing.
Thank you for the tip. I'll use that. I was very tempted to pick up one of my favorite virtual backgrounds of my favorite bar, which is the Snake Pit in Melrose in California, but it just seems strangely inappropriate, Manuel. So I just say, and Manuel, that Sue Masters just had a little meltdown right then. She'll be going, no, you can't do that. It's so wrong. So interestingly, this notion of the democratization of the workforce that happens on a audio visual platform is actually really important. And one of the things that we've found is that there's a certain siloization of the workforce when people are working from home, because everybody's kind of focused on their team's issue, and you don't get a lot of cross-pollination. And so, there's some issues with that. But because while you have got that group focused on those team issues, there are more ideas bubbling up. People feel a bit freer to speak when they're not actually sitting across the desk in a meeting, when they're just actually sitting in their environment, their home. It's much more secure. It's much safer. So I think this is, there's some really powerful workplace lessons that are happening here for us. So Joanne Taylor, who is my very dear friend, the great JT from Canada, who was also involved with IHP, she's flicked us a question, Manuel. She wants to know how much money is being spent on homelessness in our various jurisdictions. And JT, I can't give you an actual answer on that, other than to say in Victoria, our state government has instructed homelessness providers, of which we are one, to get rough sleepers off the streets and get them into whatever accommodation we can. And boy, have we been doing that with verve and alacrity, because the mission lock for us in that is an amazing sense of permission giving. So for years, we've just not had the resources to get people off the streets. And even if we had, there was nowhere to put them. But because every hotel, every Airbnb is empty, we've been able to get these people off the streets. Now, we're still waiting for the cheque to arrive to reimburse us, I might add, and we'll chase that one down as a separate argument. Easy for government to pronounce, sometimes a bit difficult for them to follow through. But Manuel, so that's what we've been doing. What any idea what's been happening around Massachusetts and Boston in particular?
Well, I don't know the total amount of money that that was spent, but certainly that there is a mandate to get people off the streets, and there, I think hotels are being used, certainly in California and Massachusetts, and it is amazing, and I think somebody was commenting on this in the Bay Area. San Francisco is notorious, and you were just there a few months ago for our IHP meeting, and it's notorious for having homeless sort of in every corner. You have to you can't help but step over some, occasionally. Yep. And yet, within 2 weeks, they basically got all the homeless folks off the streets.
In the Bay Area, really?
Yeah.
Holy hell.
Yeah, because it was sort of this mandate, you got to get people, there are differences, right? They use hotels, they use some temporary accommodations. So there's, I couldn't tell you the amount of money that was involved, because it's like, billions. If I said a number, it'll sound big, but it's like, it may be really, really short. But I think that there has been a real concerted effort, and which is another thing that shows you that, if you have to do it, you do it. So why don't we just do it in the first place?
And I think that's absolutely right, Manuel. We have seen governments now do things that they have said for years that are impossible to do.
Exactly.
And both you and I think most of the people who run community housing would understand that, particularly federal governments have the capacity to borrow money by issuing bonds at the lowest rates ever in history. And so just inflation alone effectively means that the effects of borrowing money is really not that big a deal. And with their ability to manage exchange rates, inflation rates, term and tenor of bonds, reselling of bonds, who buys those bonds, who they preference for the sale and buyback of these bonds, a lot of this is easily manipulated. And is not necessarily going to blanket future generations in mired debt forever. I mean, there are nonsense being peddled about here. And so you're right, they know that they can do it now. And so the question is, what do we do now, both in our Western economies? Because every place has done this. We've got rough sleepers off the streets. To some degree, we are supporting them. Are we just going to see them unceremoniously tipped back onto the streets again? And look, can I also say, my genuine look of surprise when you said that they'd got the rough sleepers off the streets in the Bay Area, I am truly gobsmacked by that. We know the hard work that people like Linda Mandolini and others do in the Bay Area, but you can't walk down a city block without stepping over countless numbers of homeless people there. And the nasal test alone of the Bay Area is again only it's a smell in the streets that only people who've dealt with homeless people for a long period of time might experience if they're in a room with them for a short period of time. The whole city smells like that, and it's so to hear that has been cleared off the streets leaves me speechless. Honestly, that's just amazing and such a great thing. On the subject of what governments can and cannot do, have you America is a confederation of states who don't always get on well with each other, and there is a federal government that some of the states appear to be at war with. And without getting into sort of the politics of this at all, but just in terms of the differences between the states, are you seeing significant differences in the way states are trying to deal with the homelessness problems or just affordable housing generally as a result of this, or is it still remain a little bit fractured anyway?
On the housing side itself, I mean, it's still fragmented, and I think that sort of the response has been like, you have to deal with people, on the streets, because that creates like a clear and present danger for folks there. But as far as the way that state governments have been handling the whole crisis overall, I mean, it is such a wide variety of from the enlightened to the truly you know, absolutely mind-numbingly dumb. You know, to folks that open up their economies just so that they can really get people off the unemployment rolls. Because now it's like, you know, now the employment is back up, so their jobs are there, and if they don't want them, they're actually quitting them. So, you know, it becomes like this perverse, you know, money saving scheme, which is just, you know, that sort of avarice that is at the heart of some of these policies, you know, in some states. And I don't want to like get partisan about it, but there's just like stuff that's just like, you know, obvious, and it just like, you know, galls you to,
Yeah.
you know, to see it. Massachusetts, for example, has a Republican governor, but it's a very moderate Republican governor who is, you know, taking a very cautious approach. I mean, Massachusetts has been the next to last state to open up again a little bit, but in a very, very sort of quiet and cautious way. And I think that's good, because at the federal level, like, you know, you're hearing now the president saying that even if there's like another, you know, another bout, you know, of the virus, even if it spikes up, we're not going to close down the country again. When again, you know, it's at the state level that happens. So this is part of that whole pull and tug of state versus federal.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess in a sense, Mark Zuckerberg would be very, very happy with the president at the moment, because if it wasn't for the current president, I suspect Facebook would collapse. There'd be nothing to talk about. So moving on from there, and well, but can I say the travails that our colleagues have in the United States has not escaped us. The transition back, I think, will be interesting, Manuel. You know, there's much commentary about whether, you know, offices will return back to the way they were, and clearly things will not be the way they were. So, you know, will we see the advent of more people permanently working from home? But you can't really have shared hot desking either, because, you know, the fear of contagion. So will there be a flight from urban CBD apartment living, you know, out to the idyllic surrounds of Swampscott, I might add, where it's clearly getting dark now. So, by the way, for the Australians, Swampscott, just outside of Boston, it's a bit like sitting in Williamstown looking across the water to Melbourne, only you're looking across the water to Boston. Beautiful, idyllic spot, I might add. So put that on your list for when and if we get to travel again. But in terms of how you think the cities will change and the urban agenda will change, Manuel, just quick view. Do you have a view on that from where you sit there in Swampscott?
It's you know, you know, I have no evidence for any of this, but it's clear that that there's been a move over the last 10 years or 10, 15 years, you know, everywhere, you know, around the globe, really, to move back into the cities. The U.S. has always been, you know, suburban centered kind of like society. The middle class, you know, likes being in the suburbs, you know, with like, you know, trees, single family homes, you know, and as opposed to the cities. In Europe, it's more of a city life, you know, and the suburbs are, you know, less appealing. But you know, over the last, you know, 10 years, the price of housing in the cities has become ridiculous. You know, and you know this, you've seen it in Melbourne and Sydney, you know, Boston, New York, Vancouver, everywhere. It's exactly, you know, the same thing. You're paying, you know, $2 million for a studio apartment, and you know, or something that's like, you know, why do you do this to yourself? You know, and what's going to happen now when that sort of like that lifestyle is now seen as dangerous?
Yeah.
Certainly over the next year until there's a vaccine for this thing, and then, you know, who knows what other stuff is out there. And this messes with the psyche of people anyway. You sort of suddenly realize, you know, well, this can really happen pretty easily. Will it sort of have people moving back, you know, sorry, I changed my mind, you know, I'll go back to the suburbs and commute to the city. If right now for the next year, like you can live in the city, you go to a restaurant, let's say, and you're going to have to be sitting like 6 feet away or from anybody else. And, you know, the waiters are going to be coming up to you with masks, and it's all just going to be this weird life. You know, same thing with work, right? You talk about going back to the office. is it better to just deal with a Zoom thing, or is it better to go back to the office where there's got to be a line for the bathroom, only one person at a time, and they have to be like, 2, 3, 4 meters away, from each other. You can't work next to someone, closer than, again, 2, 3 meters. And then you can't go into a conference room because what's the point of going into the conference room if only 4 people will fit? Everybody else has to be on Zoom anyway. So
yeah, and then there's the expenditure curve that we'll all have, because every time the conference room or the meeting room is used, someone is going to have to sanitize that, and there'll have to be some visual cue that the room has been sanitized, and
so it has to be wet,
services.
right? So, like shopping carts. If it's not wet, it's not safe. Right?
That's right. And can I just say, I'm pretty sure I'm not going to look good in a hazmat suit going to work. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's going to confront us. So I think there will be urban changes, there'll be office changes. The way that we communicate and move through offices will clearly be different. But one of the things that really interests me, and it was, I guess, the point that I brought up with the Federal Home Authority, who really just picked up and ended up owning all of those properties. In Australia, we have a residential construction and development industry-led economy in terms of our domestic economy. It's crashing, and for a variety of reasons. We've got huge amounts of international students who have deserted and are unlikely to come back in numbers for some time. Huge amounts of migrant workforce on visas who have gone home, unlikely to come back for some time. Huge amounts of an investment glut of residential loans that have been interest only, that are 700,000 of those loans converting to principal and interest this year. As they convert to principal and interest, of course, much higher payments. Landlords will not be able to pay their their rental revenues have been crashing. So there's carnage in our housing markets at the moment, and no one knows where that will end, except for one thing. The banks hold trillions of dollars of that debt, and the banks are underwritten by the Australian government. And so if there is indeed total property carnage, ultimately I think the federal government could potentially end up holding a lot of that stock. So, no one wishes for the carnage, can I say? We don't need to see that. But if you inexorably follow the line backwards without intervention, we will be in a very, very dark place. I don't think we'll get there, but we have seen it in the United States, particularly in 2008, 9 and 10. So let's hope we don't all go back there again. I'm very conscious, Manuel, that I'm getting texts here from Sue Masters, who's telling me it's time to wrap up. So Manuel, again, it's fabulous to see you. I will put my Bendigo hat on, or my Boston Red Sox hat, and bid thee farewell, good man. I'll hopefully see you soon. Thank you so much.
Well, we will definitely see you soon, because we're going to be continuing our International Housing Partnership virtual meetings. We can't meet in person.
Excellent.
And you've been so integral to that we got to have you there.
Well, you've got to always have a representative from the center of the universe, right?
From the center of the universe, exactly. Yeah, at IHP, you say the word center of the universe, and immediately everybody knows we're talking about Bendigo.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Manuel.
Thank you, Ken.
See you,
Good
pal.
talking to you.
Bye.